He can get all his information in because he's got a lot of good stuff. So please welcome Mr. John Van Auken.
Is it on now? No? All right, so we're testing the sound. You okay? Everything good? All right. The first part, we're going to have a two-part presentation this afternoon. The first part is our amazing soul life. And if it runs over a little bit, I'll finish it in the second part. And then we're going to have a break. And then the second part is going to be some hard evidence of reincarnation, which was done by amazing research at the University of Virginia, and it's called The Biology of Reincarnation. That sounds weird. Okay, so we start out with life in and beyond the physical. And of course, I'm going to be presenting much of the Casey material, the Edgar Casey material that these 5 acres established. And for those of you who are kind of new to this, when Edgar was a young boy, he had a lot of extrasensory qualities to him that he didn't realize were extrasensory. He thought all of us had them. But as he grew older, he found out we didn't. And some of these were pretty useful. For example, one night he did not know his spelling words, and his father was fed up with this. I had 3 kids, so I know exactly how he felt. And the little boy said, "Hey, Dad, if you'll let me sleep on this spelling book for about 15 minutes, I'll know the words." Now, my 3 have tried all sorts of stuff, and I have thought about this. I don't honestly know if I would have gone for that, but his dad did. "Okay, kid, you got 15 minutes. And he put the spelling book underneath his head, and what appeared to us to be sleep. And then his dad came in and said, "Okay, let's see about this hocus pocus." Flipped the page, and he started, and the kid knew how to spell every word. Then Edgar said, "Dad, I don't just know every word on that page. I know every word in that book and exactly what page it's on." And things like this developed. Eventually, he had the ability to go into this sort of sleep-like state, and I believe that's why he got nicknamed the Sleeping Prophet. One of the best-selling books was titled that. And help people with physical problems. And the local doctors in his area started to use him a lot. And he proved to be outstanding. It was strange because it was actually as if he was seeing and analyzing the entire body of the other person seeking help. He knew the chemistry, he knew the blood rate, the heart rate, he knew their history. And he explained it that even though we all are individual, there's a oneness that connects us all. And you can tap into that oneness, and that's basically what he was doing. Well, after about 20 years, he was in Ohio giving a health reading, only the guy who got it got upset about his health situation and said, "Well, why do I have this illness?" And calmly as can be, Edgar from his sleep trance state said, "Because in a previous life, as a monk in France, you abused the body, and this is the karma of that situation." And everybody was stunned. except the receiver of the information, for he believed in all that stuff. So he started questioning the sleeping Casey, and that began what got nicknamed the life readings. And they developed into what we're going to see today, all the content about the soul's life, the soul's journey, not just the journey of your physical body, which he seemed to be able to tap into as well. So let's begin with that. In the beginning, he says, we find in the beginning when the first of the elements were given and the forces set in motion that brought about the sphere, as we find called earth plane. He saw this more as a dimension than just a rock in space. And when the morning stars sang together, that's a reference right out of the book of Job. And the whispering winds brought the news of the coming of man's indwelling, of the spirit of the Creator became the living soul. This entity came into being with this multitude. Here's the really tricky thing. You and I were conceived back then. When God said, "Let there be light," Edgar explained that the essence of that comment was the conception of every bit of consciousness, all the individuals. Now, some of us didn't move right away. We stayed very still, and you could not have discerned us from the Creator, the one collective essence we were in harmony with. As soon as you used your free will to do something, to express something, or react to something, you started to develop a unique story, and that's your soul. But as he's saying here, the spirit of the Creator became a living soul through our expression and the freedom. And it was a magnificently loving, creative moment to conceive in the one, the many, which is written on our dollar bills, e pluribus unum, and to let the adventure begin. And actually now we don't all have much memory of this, but it's there, just behind a veil, and you can tap into it. If Edgar was here, he'd tap into it. It was all accessible. He said that every thought, every action made an impression on the collective, and he could read it. I first read that when I was about 19 or 20, and I was a wreck for 2 years. That so screwed my mind. Oh my God, somebody should have warned me. Every thought. Oh. But fortunately, I read another reading that said, new thoughts overshadow old thoughts. And I felt a lot better. So I spent a lot of time going, oh, not that thought. Don't think that thought. Push that thought away. But you see, he's saying to us that in Job, when it says the morning stars, he identified us as the morning stars. You know, the ancient Egyptians considered us star beings that had descended into it. And they had a nickname for us, godlings of the great God. And so we actually began back there, and we have a depth to us that we're not aware of. We tend to focus mostly on being born into the earth, and we don't realize this other depth. It still gets through us. It affects us. And there are moments of flashes. So that's what we're going to see in this journey. Here's another individual. We find the entity was among those in the day when the forces of the universe came together, when there was upon the waters the sound of the coming together of the sons of God. Don't worry, ladies, the sons of God are hermaphroditic, androgynous, male and female in one. I'll explain that later. When the morning stars sang together, and over the face of the waters there was the voice of the glory of the coming of the plain for man's dwelling. At that time we thought it was really cool. I don't know how you feel about it today, but back then this looked like a real interesting place. In all of these we find some of this present entity's individuality, and in some personalities are brought through. I know now you're starting to get worried that I'm talking about multiple personalities and all. Believe it or not, he used the term individuality for our bigger, unique soul self. But that entity, that original being, projects little bits of itself in what we call personalities for an incarnation, and those feed back into the greater whole of the individuality. So you see what he's saying to this individual here? You began back then, but on your journey, you have experienced many personalities that you've projected and lived a sojourn, 80 to 100-year sojourn. Then it's been assimilated back into your individuality, and it adds to the richness of the dynamics of your being. Get a sense of that there? The sound comes, that's interesting because I don't know if he was doing this, but that's how Hinduism views it. That the creation was a sound that started, and that sound was Aum, and everything started to flow out from that vibration. And so that's why they find that sound, and many in the Western world find that sound very helpful. Here's where 3 little readings in which Casey tries to help us identify our soul's purpose. Your purpose may be 2 cars in the garage, a chicken in the pot, money in the bank, and a good-looking spouse. But your soul has other ideas. And if you've lived long enough, which I can see many of you have, you know your soul had other ideas. The purpose of the heart is to know yourself, to be yourself. Gladys, his stenographer, told me when he raised his voice, she capped the words. So that's what you're seeing here. And yet, to be one with God. The purpose is that you might know yourself to be yourself, and yet one with the creative forces, not the destructive forces. Those are the dark forces. Not the things that put people down, but the things that lift people up. Not the things that judge you heavy and lay heavy trips on you, but those things that lift you up and bring out the best in you. The creative forces, or, he says, God. Those are akin to the God forces. And this last one I like a lot, that don't put the material first, for you have to live with yourself a long, long while. You realize, if you pause for a minute and think, okay, there's a part of me that is immortal, eternal. A part of you goes, I'm not so sure. Doesn't it? That's because of what we've been dealing with. But you're going to have to live with yourself a long while, so you might as well become acquainted with yourself, know yourself, and your relationship to the creative forces. So this, Casey has laid down the fundamental purposes of our existence. Know yourself to be yourself, yet one with the creative forces. Here's another one. Each experience of a soul entity in materiality is part of the whole experience of the entity. Each conception upon which the soul depends for its period of manifestation, which means an incarnation to us in the earth, is as but a moment, a day, a year in the activity of the greater entity. And if you get through that veil in yourself, boy, your life shifts. Because it's like Shakespeare's view. You start to view your life as a role you're playing, and these are the other characters. This is very interesting, but there's more to me than just this character and this situation, very interesting. Thus, it could not be said that an individual conception is a beginning, though you and I think we began. I was born in New Jersey. So John began in New Jersey. Yikes. Not true. The depths of your being are much, much bigger. It is a part of a whole. And from these activities first conceived in the mind, this is the other thing. Casey saw us more as minds inhabiting physical vehicles. And that there were levels to our mind. Conscious three-dimensional mind works pretty well out here. It's socialized, it's influenced by its parents, by its upbringing, by its memories. But just beyond the veil is a subconscious mind, much bigger than the conscious mind, and beyond the subconscious, and another veil is the superconscious mind. And that is your vast part that's in touch with the universal consciousness. And there is no time in spirit. Now, being a time-space entity, that is mind-boggling. I was in my 20s when I first read there is no time and no space, and that was really hard. But if you can kind of visualize a bird high above a river, and that your soul is like that bird high above a river, it's not like you down on the raft going through the river, seeing where you've been just a little ways back and where you might be headed. You actually see the whole, and therefore time is not the reality for the guy on the raft, you see? And so if you work with these things, you start to get a feel for them. There is time and space here, though, and you can work in that, but one of the teachings Casey had is time is malleable. You can, in a moment, have a phenomenal realization or achieve a great insight, or you can have several years struggling with something and just momentarily come out of it. So time has an elasticity to it that you need to be aware of. And even though you're, as far as space is concerned, even though you're here and so am I in a physical body, you can learn techniques to have a metaphysical experience way beyond this dimension. Yeah. And so you just keep those things in mind as you journey through this world. We are, believe it or not, according to him, star travelers. I know we feel like earthlings, terrestrial beings, but here we go. As an entity passes on from this present time or this solar system, this sun, these forces, it passes through the various spheres, leading first into that central force known as Arcturus. Believe it or not, back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, Edgar Cayce was already talking about stargates. And Arcturus was the stargate in and out of this system for our souls. I know the movie and the TV show have become a big hit, and we take it for granted that it's a hot idea. He was talking about it back then and said that this star we know as Arcturus is indeed the stargate. And he actually gave a reading. I mean, you can actually go through the stargate without death. He gave a reading for a woman who had been there the night before in her sleep. And she was mystified when she got the reading. He said, "Oh, here's one who was at Arcturus last night, marvelously re-energized and all." And she said, no, I was in my bed in Virginia Beach. No, your soul was able to leave. Nearer the Pleiades, the seven sisters. Eventually, an entity passes into the inner forces, inner sense. Then they may again, after a period of nearly 10,000 years to us on earth, enter into the earth to make manifest those forces gained in its journey through the stars, its passage. In entering, the entity takes on those forms that may be known in the dimensions of that plane which it occupies, there being only 3 dimensions as of the earth, but there may be 7 as in Mercury, or 4 in Venus, or 5 in Jupiter. Now, he's not talking about on the surface of Jupiter. He's talking in the 4th, 5th dimension where your mental self, your spiritual self, is active. You understand? You're not incarnate in a body on Mercury. Only here do you do that. There may only be 1 as in Mars. There may be many as in those of Neptune, or they may be even as nil until purified in the Saturn's fires. Ooh. Well, here's his concept. This solar system, the sun and the planets, are comparable in his vision to a university for the soul. And each of the planetary planes, not the physical structures, each of the planetary planes are a college in the system. And it identifies with the actual ancient astrology. You know Dr. Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, he was always fascinated by the fact that primitive ancient people were so interested in the stars, in the planets, and in the influence of the planets. They should be growing corn, and yet they're really into this. They study it, they analyze it, they document it. And sure enough, Casey said that's because your soul was energetically and consciously involved in lessons and activities and learning in these colleges. And when not incarnating in the earth realm, the soul actually sojourns in those areas. Classical astrology knew this, and their descriptions fit, and so here they are. A soul wanting to develop or enhance its mental skills would go to Mercury, the mind, mental development, reason, order, and the like. Venus, the heart, the arts, music, art, creativity, healing, and the like. Earth, the causal dimension, where one finds an active, that's a typo there, an active opportunity to use free will to change. Oh, you think you're this way? We have a place where you can prove it. Mars, madness, Casey said, the power, everyone's freedom to use the life force in forceful ways to benefit or woe. So you go there to learn to gain control of your driven energy, your upset, your anger, your wildness. Jupiter, high-mindedness, high ideals, large groups, and the masses. Saturn is where insufficient flesh is redone, and you get to start over. Not a vacation spot. Casey gave a reading for a young woman. He was giving her soul reading, and he said, here's one who's gone to Saturn often, and God loves one who's willing to start over. Yikes. You want to cleanse the whole thing? You take a visit there, and it's all cleansed, and you get a fresh start. Uranus, this fits with astrology, the extremes, the psychic, natural senses of the soul, in the sense of the Greek word psyche, which literally meant soul. So psychic means the senses of your soul, not of your body. Your body has 5 senses, but your soul has much more than that, and so we call them like clairaudience. You can hear more than your eardrums are hearing. See? Clairvoyance. More than the cones in my eyes are picking up, my soul can see much more. When Edgar looked at you, he also saw all the discarnates in the room as well as the incarnates. That was spooky. And he'd take a question from one of them sometimes just to freak us out. Yes, you over here near the screen. Everybody, Edgar, there's nobody near the screen. Oh yeah, he's as interested in the topic as we are. Yikes. He saw auras, of course. And when you were talking with him, he could see the colors change, and he knew when you were starting to exaggerate. The fish was this big. Your colors would change. One time, an elevator, he was in New York, and an elevator door opened, and he saw no auras on the people, and he backed away out of confusion. He had never seen that. The elevator door closed, and the elevator malfunctioned, and they all died. But he didn't get on the elevator because he saw no life force, which to him meant their souls had already left those bodies. You see what I mean? When we judge, we often judge by the physical, but for them not to have any auric field meant their essence, their spirit was not there. Pluto consciousness, of course, our scientists have just demoted Pluto, so the little bugger is no longer a planet. But Edgar had identified it as the consciousness. So when you finish with this university, you have a greater consciousness. You have a lot more of your soul's abilities honed and developed, and you move through the Stargate Arcturus on to other opportunities. If you want to read a lot more, and some of you have always come up to me and you're so fascinated by it, this is the book. This book is verbatim Casey readings on this topic, and the bookstore has it. And there's a lot more in that. Kevin Tedeschi and I wrote these, or compiled these books and put them in there. So you'll really get his readings on planetary influences and sojourns if you're interested in this sort of stuff. Now we come to what's driving you and me. Now I know the outer self is driven to material success, but actually Edgar says we're actually seeking home. It just touches me when I think that my soul is doing that, because I've been taking it on a wild journey away from home. Anyway, As the entity moves from sphere to sphere, it seeks its way to the home, to the face of the Creator that conceived it, the Father, the first cause. Casey identifies the first cause as, quote, that the created would be the companion for the Creator. Whoa. This is the reason we were created. And as a result, the created, now that's not your physical body, that's your soul, is given opportunities to, quote, show itself to be not only worthy of, but companionable to the Creator. Now we're talking about the Creator of the entire cosmos. And unless you want to be a very dull companion, you got a lot of magnificent journey to be on and to enrich and to develop yourself. I mean, the journey is abundant and vast and exciting. This is what your deeper self seeks. And you might think you have to go somewhere, but really it's all happening in this dynamic of what Edgar called in that previous reading, the inner forces, the inner sense. So it's happening within you. Casey said that our taking on many forms in many different dimensions and spheres helps us to experience the whole of our being. That's why we travel so much. And of our Creator's consciousness, because the collective, the universal consciousness contains it all. And the more you're aware of all of it, the more fascinating a companion you are. The more interesting you are, the more compatible or companionable you are. He said that, quote, self is lost in that of attaining for itself the nearer and nearer approach that builds in manifested form, whether in the Pleiades, Arcturus, Gemini, or in Earth, in Vulcan, or in Neptune. See, he adds a lot of value to our incarnating here. He says it's very purposeful, it's intentional, and it has a lot to contribute to the whole of our experience. Yet, despite our taking on many forms as we manifest ourselves, our true nature is, according to his readings, quote, as light, a ray that does not end, lives on and on until it becomes one in essence with the source of light. And as you know, the ancient Egyptians felt the same way about this. So now we come to the college Earth, cause and effect, the realm of testing. If you didn't know that, that's where you're abiding right now. Edgar said that the book of Job was written by the high priest Melchizedek for every incarnate soul to know what this world was about. Well, when I read that, I was not too happy to hear that because I had read the book of Job. It begins, the sons and daughters of God came before God to present themselves, and Satan came among them. God turns to Satan and says, have you considered my servant Job? How good he is? And Satan says, you touch one thing of his physical life or his physical body, and he'll curse you to your face. And then God turns to Satan and says, test him. You see, in ancient Hebrew, Satan was the tester. Satan had a job, had a role. Okay? And so, as you know from the story, the first thing Satan does is test his body with boils and illness and all. And Job does not curse God, but keeps trying to plug through it all. Then he starts taking away his children, his property, his life. And all his buddies start saying, oh, Job, you've done something really bad, and God is real upset with you. And Job said, no. God is merciful and understanding. And every time we've made a mistake or done something wrong, I've asked for forgiveness. I've worked on changing. I'm not going to accept that as the condition, as the situation. And he plugs through it. Eventually, God comes to Job. And he says, Job, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think for a few minutes before you answer it. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Now, Job's about 60 years old. And God says to him again, think before you answer this, where were you? And of course, most ministers use this to put us down as nothing compared to God. But the question actually is trying to get Job to realize, you were with me. We laid the foundations of this journey. We laid the foundations of this plane. You're a celestial being. You're a child of God. You're part of my journey. But this is the realm of testing. And so when you come here, as Hugh Lynn Casey, the firstborn son of Edgar Casey, used to say, all your karmic situations and all the difficulties are your opportunities. So I had to shift my head, because I used to say, oh gosh. And then I'd say, well, this is an opportunity. We'll see. It's all about soul growth, you guys. Soul growth in you and soul growth in those around you. And so I put a little pearl here because Edgar spoke about the pearl as a highly symbolic and vibrational item that was created by an irritant. The oyster got a piece of something inside its shell that hurt, like a thorn in its side. But instead of griping about it for 20 years, spitting, cursing, it started to build around that little irritant this magnificent gem that everybody loves to have, the beautiful pearl. And that's soul growth. That's our journey here, is soul growth. Yes, there are a lot of other submissions for us, but keep that in mind, that really what you're dealing with is soul growth. What's the outcome of soul growth? Well, it's not going to the land of harmony, but the dimension, the state of harmonic consciousness and vibration. So it's higher vibes, enlightened consciousness, and being in harmony with the whole. And the whole includes more than just yourself. So this harmony expands out. You first have to find harmony in yourself, with yourself, but then your surroundings you must operate in more harmoniously. And of course, Earth has developed this thing we call reincarnation. And as Buddha said, cycles of birth, life, death, and rebirth. And as you know, the idea is that you and I are trapped in this wheel. We are caught in this cycle. Here's a little diagram I've laid out, and we can study this little diagram here, and it'll help us a great deal. At some point, the morning stars thought this was an interesting dimension, the dimension of form, of three-dimensional projections. The Maya tell the story that when we first projected, we still maintained such celestial consciousness that we were highly sophisticated and still celestial beings just looking around physically, three-dimensionally, okay? So when you saw one of us, you actually saw the soul, because the whole being was consciously aware that he was projecting a form of itself to be in this dimension. Unfortunately, gradually, too much of the consciousness moved into the focus of the projection, and as Carl Jung points out, all of this fell into the unconscious, behind the veil. And now, you identified so much with the body and your personality and this realm that you lost touch, and death occurred. When the body died, you thought you died. It was an illusion, but it was a powerful illusion, and you bought into the illusion. You see? In the Edgar Casey readings, he comes out and says there is no death, which is really amazing, since I've buried some people, and he is seeing the mind, the soul, the essence, the vibrations, the energetics of an entity in a body. The body stopped working, but the other parts are still alive. They're not projecting to where the cones of my eyes can see them, or the vibrations of their voice will vibrate my eardrums. But yet, if I get into my deeper senses, I can see their essence, and I can hear them. And of course, I told you Edgar could do that naturally. One time, he and Gertrude, his wife, were asleep on the second floor of their house, and a tapping came on the window. And Gertrude was kind of alarmed. Edgar said, "Oh, I know who this is. I'll be back in a minute." And he puts on his robe and goes downstairs, opens the front door. And she hears him speaking, so she goes downstairs a little while later, and he says, "Oh, you remember the girl who used to visit us at the shop in Selma, Alabama? Well, she died a few years back, and she came by to visit, but she didn't want to come into our bedroom and talk, so she tapped on the window." That essence comes down into a physical form that is formed by the laws of nature and a woman. You can only get into this dimension through a woman, unless you just want to be a ghost, which is not total functionality here. She forms this vehicle following the laws of nature inside her, and Edgar says within 24 hours of the birth of the body, the soul enters the body. Now, I know we don't usually think that. So he explained, he said, if you knew how mundane this dimension is, you'd know we're not in a hurry to get in here. Once in, though, the veil falls, and you're in. And then he said, he used the word, you're encased in a body for a sojourn. Yikes. This is a celestial being, trapped now in a three-dimensional vehicle for about 80 to 100 years, you know. And you and I know what that's like. So then the thing stops working on you so well, and you got to leave. And we call this death. But actually, Edgar says, he has a wonderful series on the first 10 minutes after death in which your soul, your outer self goes, what just happened? And becomes concerned. Things aren't operating like they should. And it sort of moves back into its deeper self very near the veil and is absorbed into the bigger mind, which is more comfortable with this. And Edgar says that happens almost every night when you sleep. Unless you had a big pizza at midnight, you're actually going to slip through that veil into your soul self. So you're familiar with this. And if you've ever worked on dreams and meditation and inner work, it's going to be very familiar to you because you've been in that state many times. You won't be so surprised. He actually gave a reading in which he said in the 60s and 70s we're going to have a whole new view of death. And what happened in the late 60s, early 70s? Yes, and near-death experience. Now they're on Amazon.com, they're like 30-some books on people who died and recorded it. Basically what happened is the medical profession of all people became so sophisticated with their chemistry, their electricity, and their physical manipulations, which we've seen on TV enough now, to where we know what it means when they say, clear! All of us know, right? That they could bring a dead person back to life. Now, I want you to capture this. On the operating room table or the emergency room table, there is nothing but a blue-gray, clammy, dead carcass. There's no electricity, no nervous system, no blood flowing, no breathing. You got it? It's really dead. And yet, when they got it back to life, in the recovery room, the doctor would go in and say something like, man, we had a close one with you. And the patient would say, yeah, I was amazed when you jumped up on my chest like that. And the doctor would go, wait a minute, you were dead. He said, well, I thought it was strange too, but I was over in the corner. And the nurse did this, and you did that, and all the medical guys did was record these and say, something associated with the dead person was conscious in the room. That's the way a scientist doesn't box himself in, you know, and saw what we did. And you know how this all developed. Now it's big time, and they got multiple layers to it. So really, as we go back to the slide, there's a transitional period here that's very tricky. But once the adjustment is made, the soul awakens and it's on its journey again. And it can do whatever it wants to do. Or he says if it's numb or semi-conscious about the whole of its being, it drifts around here in the borderland as a ghost, a trapped soul. But if it has any sense of consciousness, it usually is drawn by the magnetics of the creative force to a higher level, and it starts to make its journey and get on its way. Now notice if it comes back in and incarnates again, this isn't the same body we had here, right? We all burned or buried that one. You're coming into a new body, and Jesus said, we sweep your house clean and you come back and bring 7 devils with you. The 7 spiritual centers, the 7 energetics of your attitude, all your karma. And you come back in for the sojourn here, you see, and you go out. But you can break out of the wheel. He actually gave a reading for something like 18 people who were told, this will be your last incarnation. And one of them were a pair of brothers, and the first brother came and Edgar said, this is your last incarnation. And the other brother heard that, so he came to get a reading. He said, you told my brother Mort that this was his last thing. It's probably the same for me too, right? And Edgar from trance said, oh no, you're one of those souls who wants to be here until all the souls are freed of this dimension. And Edwin goes, when did that go down? When did that vote happen? If you want soul growth, the best way to grow is relationships. Ay, ay, ay. Nothing will grow you faster than to set up relationships. Edgar and Gertrude's 2 sons were on opposite side of most armies and influences in their previous lives. Can you imagine them as 2 boys in the house? Yeah. But eventually they grew to love one another, cooperate, play bridge together. But at first, these 2 souls had a lot of issues with one another. You are actually in situations to help your soul growth. And in your dynamics of relationships, that's where you have much of your growth. Now, you're not locked in. I want to point out one little detail. A young girl came and said, why do I have so much karma with my mother? And Edgar from trance said, there's no karma between the 2. If you resolve it, it's done for you. Your mother will work it out with someone else. You see? Now, on another reading, he said a woman asked why she was from New York, married to this guy. He was impotent and confined to a wheelchair, but she loved him. And she asked Edgar Cayce about the situation. And he said in a previous life, he was one of the greatest of the crusaders, but every time he went off to the wars, he put you under lock and key. And you swore you'd get even with him. You've got him right where you always wanted him. Choose thou, he said. Now, he went on to explain to her, he could have worked this out with some other soul who had an attitude that they had to deal with. But she wanted to teach him the lesson. And remember, she said, I love him. So even though he was a nasty old bugger to her in one situation, she had an energetic with him in many situations, many parts of their relationship. So keep in mind that though he told the young daughter, if it's done with you, you don't have to worry about your mother will work it out. Unless you say to yourself, I'm going to get even with that bugger, then you have just bonded yourself. So be real careful about that. Say something like, well, I hope he works it out and God will help him and all that, but I'm moving on from this situation. Bless you, I have no more. Because remember the story of the crusader in the wheelchair, yes. Jesus said the second commandment is like the first. And in all my lectures, I always point out, it isn't like the first. The first is love God with all your being. And God understands me, and God and I have a good relationship, and I know He loves me. Have you met these other people? This is not like the first. Until you get to a point where you comprehend that the God that you're having a personal relationship with includes all the others. And then, oh my goodness, you realize, I'm going to get there. Edgar actually gave a reading for a young man who was doing all this yoga stuff, yoga breathing. He was having all his chakras open. He was doing really well. And he came back to ask for another adjustment in one of his techniques. And Edgar interrupted him and said, you think it's great to be one of the children of God. It's far greater to be one with them. You're building a heaven all by yourself. And you're not going to want to be there when you get there. It's time for you to go out among that messy group and interact with them and help them. This is the dynamic of that strange comment, the second commandment's like the first. Soulmates and twin souls, this is part of our journey. The twin soul is the concept that the yin and yang is within us. At our soul level. You are both male and female at your higher level. You have both characteristics. Yes, I have only projected my masculinity, and you've projected your femininity. And it matches the gender of my body, and I'm that dynamic. And like Carl Jung says, the rest is behind the veil. In my unconscious is my anima, my feminine, my yin, right? You get a feel for this? So full consciousness, he taught, I have to awaken to my feminine energy if I want full consciousness, because I'm only in half of the whole of my conscious soul mind. You get a feel for that? And ladies, you know, you have to get in touch with your masculinity. And we've been doing this for the last 30 or 40 years here, right? It's been hell, but we've been doing it. So, soulmates is very different, and Edgar pointed out we focus too much on the word mate. Soulmate to him were souls who had bonded over lots of experiences together. And one person asked him, is my soulmate incarnate? And he said, about 30 of them are right now. Keep that in mind. A soulmate is like a soul that you know well and knows you well. You might not be thrilled with each other in all aspects of your life, but you two have traveled a lot together. You're part of this, and there's really a dynamic between you. And remember something else. Choosing a soulmate at 18 years of age is very different than 38 years of age, right? And 58 years of age, and 68 years of age. We all know this, don't we? Of course, the young ones don't want to hear that from us. That's okay. They'll learn. They'll figure it out. So as you can see, Genesis 2, verse 18 to 25, God divides the soul in feminine and masculine. Edgar refers to it as, watch how he did it. He cast a deep sleep over the androgynous Adam and pulls out, in Hebrew, kava, the feminine, the life giver in Hebrew is what kava means, and separates the two. And so we are half of what we could be. And that's why we're all trying to get into touch with our feminine side or our masculine side to become whole again. Here you see Shiva and Shakti in Hinduism, where the concept is well done. And of course, Jung used animus for the male and anima for the feminine. We travel also in soul groups, you guys. Soul groups. We have been traveling together a while. We know most every soul in our life. Now, this is a soul group. But it's not the one I'm talking about. But these are one of my favorites. These are the Shylights. Of course, if you were born after 1970, you don't know what I'm talking about at all. But I'll bet you've heard this song. Let me shift to it if the computer will do it here. So what do you want me to do here? Pull this and put it back in? Yeah, there we go. We're having... okay, here we go. Just take a minute. Patience, it's one of the virtues. Doesn't look like it's going to do it. Okay, so you want me to reboot? All right, here we go.
I think the soul doesn't want to cooperate.
That's right. So let's see if this works. Ta-da! Here we go. We're coming back. So while it's doing that, I'll explain soul groups. Believe it or not, most of us actually chose our parents, according to Edgar Cayce. Either karmically chose them, in other words, we'd already set up that dynamic by what we had done before, even though you weren't thrilled about it. In my case, I was like 16 when I read that in the Cayce readings, and I thought, well, he's wrong there. There's no way I would have done this. And I actually had nightmares as a young boy about being born to these parents. And so it took me a while. Now, my parents, I just left the birthday party for my mother, who's 95, and my father, who's 94. And now we're, buds. But back then it was like, no, not these two. Oh, my God. And we worked through it. I mean, it was just as scary for them. You imagine that little baby going, oh, I'm not sure of this one. And so here we go. Let's see if I can still squeeze in the shy lights. Let's see if this will do it real quickly here. And there it is. We were a little worried that this wasn't going to work. And of course, you'll have to wait a minute. There's a little musical lead in. But once you hear this, I think you'll know this group. Of course, if you were born before 70s, you all know this group. The Shy Lights. Good voices. And when they do harmonies, very good harmonies. Just definitely a soul group. And so let's go down here to them. Only the Shy Lights could wear these outfits, believe me. And there they, it's coming up. The slide coming back up? Don't tell me it's not projecting again. Do you want me to do the thing again? Okay. And here it comes. No? Yes. Okay. They're just a cool group. But of course, this is the type of soul group I'm talking about. Believe it or not, you actually, all of us were the morning stars harmoniously. And we have individuated so much that we separate. And now we even have judgment against other parts of the group, even though the truth is we're all one. We're all the morning stars. Those living in the deserts of Africa or the mountains of the Himalayas are all part of the soul group that came to Earth. So truly, soul groups do overlap, as you can see with these circles I'm trying to show you. And I think I've got a little sub-drawing. Yeah. So you see, this is your red group, and you might have some of the souls in your life belong to another group that you're familiar with, and there might be a subgroup. There might even be a group that very few people in your present circles have had the experiences that you and those few people have. You see what I mean? You could have a little small subgroup, and you could have a big group. But then there's a core group that's going through this whole journey. For example, Edgar Cayce and his core group went through this whole journey together. But they bumped into the ancient Egyptian incarnation people, the ancient Atlantis incarnation people, the Palestinian people of the time of Jesus, and so forth. I'll give you an example that nothing's rigid that I'm telling you. For example, a woman came to Edgar Cayce who had already had several children, but she was young still, in her mid-30s, late 30s, and she wanted to have another children. She was very healthy. Her husband was wealthy. They were fine. They had everything, and she was doing real well with the first 3 kids or so. So she had another child late. So she had a group of children, and now she had one 9, 10 years after them. She came to Edgar Casey and said, "What's my karmic relationship with this new son?" And Edgar from trance said, "No relationship to this soul. Do you remember the prayer you said before you conceived?" And I'm sure she went, darn, what did I say? You said, "God, send me someone who really needs my help." He said, "You are going to be this soul's only comfort in this incarnation. When he goes off to high school, he's going to meet all those that he's been cruel to. He's lorded over. He has been the brutal conqueror of, but he'll come home every afternoon to you with no judgment. So be real careful about what you pray for." The other situation is Gertrude Casey. When they were in Ohio, after Lambers asked why I had this illness, and Edgar said in a past life, all the members of the family there wanted a past life reading. So he gave them all their past, not all their past lives, but about 4 to 6 of their major past lives. Well, all of them were in Palestine at the time of Jesus except Gertrude, his wife. So she pouted for about a week. She said, "I don't know what you're doing, but I love Jesus as much as the rest of you." And Edgar said, "Well, honey, I don't know what happened. I'm unconscious. Let's do it again. He's got to sleep with her at night, you know. So, we all know what that's like. Okay. So they do it again. Edgar goes into trance. They ask the question, "You said this, but Gertrude feels this." And from trance, he said, "Oh, but the question was who was incarnate." Gertrude's soul at that time was the guardian angel of the disciple Andrew. And he would have fallen off the path if she hadn't guided him from the other side through that light. Well, Gertrude was really fine with that. Do you see the dynamic that shows you, though? And remember in the near-death experience how often the person felt wonderful to be on the other side and just wanted to stay, but their heart cared for someone and knew they couldn't make it without their help. You remember reading some of that in the near-death? And that feeling drew them back to be there for that other soul who was not going to have as easy a time incarnating if they weren't there for them. So see, some of these dynamics can set you up, but also you can do it as a discarnate angelic being helping from the other side. Edgar said that the chapter 19 of the Revelation, when the angel appears to John, who's having that revelation on the little island of Patmos, was actually Peter appearing to John. And when they had been captured together, the Romans were going to kill Peter, but they banished John to the island of Patmos. And as they were parting, Peter turned to John and said, "After my demise, I will endeavor to come to you." And Casey said chapter 19 is when he came. But what did John see? He saw the angel of the Lord in chapter. He falls down to worship it. Nobody reads what the angel says. I don't know why that is. The angel says, "Don't do that, I'm your brother in this." What glorious angel of the Lord is my brother? Do you see? John had that angelic aspect too, but he was so deep in the earth, so deep in personality and the struggles here, he had lost touch with it. So here's Peter. He looks like an angel of God. He's so glorious. So keep that in mind. There's a part of you, and even the most disgusting member of your family, do your best to keep in mind that at some level this guy is an angel. Let's hope we can awaken that. Now, what's inside this dynamic is our huge soul group called the Morning Stars. Believe it or not all the souls conceived have come to earth, but certainly all of us in this room. We are of the soul group called the Morning Stars. All of us that incarnate in the planet Earth and have incarnated in the planet Earth And that diagram you're seeing there was carved on one of the oldest temples in Egypt. It's called the Flower of Life. And we are in this network of energetics. Now, we've lost touch with it, so we tend to point fingers at one another, and we tend to kill one another, and we're still arguing, but it's one family in a big argument. And eventually that harmonics has to come back. And as the scriptures say, the lion will lie down with the lamb and stop eating it, and we will shift and become one family again. It may be a long time yet as we count time. But we do travel in these soul groups. And they descended out of heaven. Here's the passage from the book of Job with Edgar's added little clause. And we descended out of light beings into physical matter beings, but we have auras. The light does radiate. Edgar says the body is still evolving, and in the next cycle, we're actually going to have greater auric fields. He said there's going to be more phosphorus in our new body. We'll have 12 chakras instead of 7. A guy once asked him to name the other chakras, and he said, "Why? You're not using the 7." We don't have to go somewhere to have this enlightenment, because as we have learned in Luke 17, the kingdom of God is within you. And here's this marvelous etching from the Asian world. Through her crown chakra, you see her celestial, glorious, angelic, godly self, spiritual self, made in the image of the Creator, coming through the crown chakra, the soft spot, the fontanelle in the body of the human, into a physical body for an incarnation. And this is actually what Edgar said happens. The woman that makes the physical body, the soft spot in the crown chakra in the top of the head is how your soul enters your body, and it moves into your nervous system, completely into your nervous system, gets inside the nervous system, bringing with it all its energetics, but also dealing with the DNA, the genetics of the mom and dad, right? And then the mom and dad are going to socialize this child. You're going to look through your little baby eyes and say, "Oh, that's a man, and that's a woman." Then Uncle Walt will come over and you'll go, "That's a man too." And Aunt Marie will come over and you'll go, "That's a woman too." And you'll start to grow by socialization. Your economic social strata will affect you, your genetics, yeah, but inside is your soul. And your souls bring a lot of dynamics. If you're aware of Rudolf Steiner, Edgar Cayce and Rudolf Steiner both said the soul doesn't incarnate in one fell swoop. It comes in stages. And if the body's damaged or killed before it's fully in, the soul may reincarnate very quickly. If not, and the soul lives a little while, it might leave here for as long as it wants to, because it's been here, and it's not that dynamic a place. If you have any level of consciousness. If you don't, yes, you can get trapped here like a ghost and all. So you come in, and Edgar says at or around the time of birth of the body, you enter the body, and then when the teeth come in, don't ask me why, and nobody asked him, more of the soul comes in, and then at 7 or 8 years of age, the soul projects its gender. Yeah. A woman 8 months pregnant came to Edgar Cayce and said, "What sex is my child?" And he said, "That hasn't been determined yet." And she said, "I'm 8 months pregnant." He said, "Oh, I can tell you the gender of the physical body. But around 7 or 8 years of age, it's going to choose which of its characteristics, gender characteristics, it's going to express." And he said, "I encourage you to teach them the ideal of the gender of their physical body, and by that time, they'll do it better." So I was working on this all the time with my kids, and I'd say to my son, I'd say, "James, the Terminator may be cool, but he's not an ideal male." And Jacqueline, I'd say, "Jacqueline, honey, that girl draped over that Chevy is not an ideal female." Believe me. It may look cool because the commercial makes it, but it's not true and everything. And my wife would say, "Hey, you got to lighten up." I'd say, "I've only got 6 more months before she makes up her own mind." in your body, believe it or not, it's a fantastic physical manifesting vehicle, but it's a fantastic secret metaphysical vehicle. It's totally arranged and wired for metaphysical experience, and you can learn to use it that way. The Sushumna out of Hinduism is your cerebrospinal system, your brain and your spine, your spinal cord and the fluids. See? And then Ida and Pingala, the double serpents, are the autonomic nervous system, which is composed of the sympathetic, the red serpent here, and the parasympathetic. Basically, those are the system that adjusts everything when you're at rest, and the system that kicks in when you're excited, when you're anxious. Fight or flight, something's up, you have to change real quick. Those are the two autonomic systems that work here. And the medical profession took this as a symbol of healing. They've forgotten why they did it, but that's it. That's the caduceus right there. And it is the staff of Mercury, or the symbol of your metaphysical powers in your body, which you can learn to do. And we teach here a lot, and you've probably studied much of this. You're also a celestial being, a light being, temporarily sojourning terrestrially. The ancient Egyptians called us the Aku, which was a star being. But the only way you could awaken your suspended Aku is to bring your soul and your spirit back together. If your soul and spirit united, your Aku would awaken. Fascinating stuff. And, of course, from individuality into a collective soul group. This is the dynamic. If you've been in a family long enough, you know you sort of lose your individualness in that you're participating collectively with others. And that's the dynamic of the second commandment, that your mind starts to think a little less of self and more of the collective. And even Jesus said, greater love has no one, but they lay down their life for the others. It doesn't mean kill yourself or get yourself killed. It means stop thinking so much about yourself and you think of the collective more. And back in the ancient times, the souls were collective because, let's go to that next slide. The sons of Ra and the daughters of Isis. This was a homogeneous flow of many, many souls. The daughters of Isis were many individual souls, but they worked together as one feminine goddess of dynamic, life-giving energy. And the sons of Ra, same sort of dynamic. We were collective. Now, as you come down deeper into individuation, you become Ra-Ta. Now you're an individual and you got a second name. You see what happened? Or Isis Isris. You've come down out of the collective. So just keep in mind that there is a harmonic of all of us. And it is all about soul growth. Here's one of my favorite readings. Never think too highly of yourself and never belittle yourself too much. You have almost lost hold of yourself at times and feeling sorry for yourself. You have nothing to feel sorry for. God is just as mindful of you, though you have made a wreck of some people's lives. I can really identify with that. And you'll have to meet it. Ooh. You just can't walk away from that. Actually, your soul wants to resolve it. But that you are alive, that you are conscious, and that you have the opportunity in this period to apply yourself in the reconstruction of what man is to look forward to, should encourage you to know that God is mindful of each soul. Then use the abilities that you have, and you have many. Believe me, everyone in this room, even those of you who think you are not creative, you have all the abilities of a child of the creator of the entire cosmos latent within you. Edgar would sometimes give readings for people who would later tell me, I don't think I'm a good musician, or I don't think I can write. I don't think I'm this or that, because it was latent beneath the surface. But he saw it and wanted them to work toward it, because that bud would eventually bloom and would come alive. So keep these things in mind. Don't think too hard on yourself, and don't think too big about yourself. And really pursue the fullness of your expression as an individual, because you are a celestial child, a celestial being, not just a terrestrial one. And God is fully mindful of you. One of the greatest things in soul growth, Casey said, are the fruits of the Spirit. You find these in the scriptures with Paul, but here's a Casey reading on the fruits of the Spirit. Now, imagine a fruit. If you eat this, the essence of that tree of life is in you. And that's why using these fruits actually grows within you the Spirit. Do that which is good, for there has been given in the consciousness of all. So you have no excuse. Somewhere you heard this along the way. The fruits of the Spirit, which are fellowship, kindness, gentleness, patience, long-suffering. Oh, we don't like that one. Love. These be the fruits of the Spirit. Against such there is no law. Doubt, fear, avarice, greed, selfishness, self-will. These are the fruits of the evil forces. Against such there is a law. Self-preservation, then, should be in the fruits of the Spirit. I mean, you just think logically, wouldn't you rather have the fruits of the Spirit than the fruits of the darkness of the evil? So you can move from life to life, from good to good, from death to life, and from evil to good. Seek and you will find. Meditate on the fruits of the Spirit in the inner secrets of the consciousness. Introspective, quiet attunement, reflection, meditation. And the cells in the body become aware of the awakening of the life. Your spiritual centers, which some of you call chakras, they're associated with the endocrine glands. And the endocrine glands secrete what? Hormones. Now, those are powerful changes in the messages to the cells of your body. So if you just start changing, you're going to send different messages. All the cells are going to go, well, what does she want to do? And here he goes and says the cells of your mind are also affected when they become aware of the life in the Spirit. The Spirit of life makes you not afraid, and then know the way, for those that seek may find. Your mission. Here's an example of a fruit of the Spirit, kindness, and this is by Richard Carlson, the guy who wrote the book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and It's All Small Stuff. And here he says, choose being kind over being right, and you'll be right every time. And I'll tell you, you'll be a better spouse and a better parent. Because I know what it's like to want to be right. That was my natural disposition when I was younger. I know what's right, and I'm going to tell you. And that didn't work. I can tell you that doesn't work. It's much better to be kind, and then you'll always be right. And of course, here's Paul writing about love. He's the one that used the term fruits of the Spirit. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous, love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. In other words, it's not trying to do a cliquey thing. You know, we're all like this and the rest of them are terrible. You see, does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But we also have grace. We have karma, but we have grace. And here's Edgar's reading on grace. And that's the book I wrote. I got all that stuff in that book if you want more on grace. As one sets itself to accomplish that which is of a creative influence rather than destructive or judgmental, no longer is the entity under the law of cause and effect or karma, but rather in grace. The mystery of grace in the law. The law is, as you sow, you reap. And Jesus said, not one jot or tittle will be erased from the law. And of course, whatever you do with your free will, you experience. And the kids in high school all know this. They all do this saying, what goes around comes around. When I was in high school, we didn't have this saying. Then Jesus says, learn what this means. I seek mercy, not sacrifice. And when you look at it, the law's in effect always, okay? It's never suspended. As soon as I, who have made mistakes, understand a mistake in you, the law is still in effect. Understanding comes back upon me. And if I forgive what you said or did, the law is still in effect. Forgiveness comes back upon me. And God help me if I forgot you said it or did it. Let it go. Move on. It's let go what I did or said. Forgotten. Erased from the book. This is the magical power of this law and the wonder of grace dancing into the law and suspending it in many ways. Of course, soul growth occurs through techniques that can really help you get out of your personality and your earthly focus. Dreams, these are all Casey's ideas. Dreams, meditation, inner listening, as Elijah said, the still small voice within. Psalm 46, be still and know that I am God. Group study, participating with others. Group activity, participating with others. Family and friends, actively working among them with a higher intention, a higher awareness. And others, like Jesus said, no greater love. And so here's a great dream book by LCC, Chris, Dreams Your Magic Mirror. And there's the Casey verbatim readings on meditation, prayer, and affirmation. And this is a video I did last year, meditation techniques for soul growth. So if you want to get into any of that sort of stuff. Here's the paradox. In the middle of this idea of growth and becoming, Edgar says there's a part of you that has never moved, never changed. Same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In you is a pure, perfect place. And if you ever touch it, you'll never be the same again. Even though you got to still come out here and pull your pants on and live life and pay the mortgage. That place is in you. So there is true essence being. And yet there's growth and becoming and time and space and opportunity and challenges. It's a paradox. If you also will become aware of the observer and the doer, you'll start to touch that deeper soul self because it's the observer. The part of you that observes and the other part that's doing, it's a magnificent way. Edgar used to say, watch self go by. And actually when you're doing that, you're slipping back in the veil, right? Because you're letting the willful outer part of you move, but you're watching. And you're getting used to being at that level. Know yourself to be yourself, yet one with the whole, and unfortunately the whole includes all the others. Yuck, yuck, yuck. So as messy as they are, you got to get involved. Make the world a better place, the little world and the big world, for you having lived in it. The little world of your own thoughts and dynamic and those close to you. Love and helping others are the keys to fulfillment. And Edgar said the only sin is selfishness. All the other sins are just variations out of a selfishness, out of a self-gratifying, self-glorifying, self-exalting, self-seeking, with no thought of others or the outcome or the effect. So, this is your soul journey. This is your mission, your opportunity here. We're going to, are we ready? We're ready. We're going to take our break and come back.
Don't move yet, though.
All right.
I have an announcement so that this
okay.
goes smoothly. We're breaking in the mini auditorium, which is right next door, and there are chairs outside. If you would please not bring coffee and food back into this room, but it's beautiful out. Just go out the doors. We'll be on the patio, and we had one of our urns blew a fuse, so we don't have any hot water for tea, but we do have cold drinks, and we have coffee is all on the outside. We have things set up in a U. So if you go on the outside of the U, you'll be at the coffee, and you can get food from either side. If you go on the inside, you can get your cold drinks. And we'll get the fuse thing fixed for tomorrow, so don't worry about it. And we'll call you back. You can leave your stuff during the breaks. Don't worry about that. Thank you, John.